Good afternoon, champions, and happy Tuesday. Today we're going to talk about how to divide and write a decimal remainder. By the end of today, you will be able to write a remainder as a mixed number, as a decimal, and as just a plain old remainder. I think you're going to do a great job with this lesson, and so does, in his return, Mr. Smiles. What? The double thumbs up, Mr. Smiles, with real eyes. Let's get started. 13 divided by 2. Let's think about this in a real-world context. Let's say that you have $13 and you want to split it evenly with your friend. Well, then I could write 13 not just as 13, but as 13.00, $13. And you're splitting it two ways. You and a friend are splitting that $13. I learned yesterday that before I divide by a decimal, I bring my decimal point straight up. So go ahead and do that now on your notes. Now I can divide like normal. I know 2 doesn't go into 1, but 2 does go into 13. 2 goes into 13 6 times. Just like normal, when I divide, I multiply, I subtract, and I bring down. So 6 times 2 is 12. I subtract and I get 1. Bring down my 0. 2 goes into 10 5 times. 5 times 2 is 10. I have 0 left over. I can bring down my 0. Each person would get $6.50, or 6 5/10, however you want to write it. When I divide and write a decimal as a remainder, all I need to do is add a decimal point and zeros to my dividend before I start dividing. Let's move on to another example. 14 divided by 5. Again, I can write my number as 14 and 0 hundredths, just like I'm splitting money 5 ways, divided by 5. What's the first thing I should do before I divide? I need to bring my decimal straight up. Do that now. Now I can divide like normal. Am I going to start in the tens place, in the ones place, or in the tenths place? I'm going to start in the ones place. How many times does 5 go into 14? 5 goes into 14 twice. 2 times 5 is 10. Subtract, and I get 4. How many times does 5 go into 40? 5 goes into 40 8 times. 8 times 5 is 40. Subtract, and I get 0. Bring down my 0. 5 goes into 0 times. So if I split $14 5 ways, each person would get $2.80. Let's try another. 137 divided by 4. Imagine you have $137 and you're splitting it between 4 people. The first thing I would do is write a decimal point and 2 zeros on the end of my 137. Then I could put my 4. What's the first thing I need to do? I need to bring my decimal straight up. 4 goes into 13 3 times. That's 12. 4 goes into 17 4 times. That's 16. 4 goes into 10 twice. That's 8. And 4 goes into 20 5 times. So if I split $137 4 ways, I would get $34.25 for each person. Sometimes 2 zeros won't be enough, and if that's the case, that's alright, because remember, when I add zeros at the end of a decimal, it doesn't change the value of my decimal. Let's do 15 divided by 8. Well, the first thing I'm going to do is add a decimal point and 2 zeros. Before I start dividing, what do I need to do? I need to bring the decimal point straight up. Now I can get started. How many times does 8 go into 15? Well, 8 goes into 15 one time. 1 times 8 is 8. When I subtract, I have 7 left over. Bring down my 0. How many times does 8 go into 70? 8 goes into 70 8 times. 8 times 8 is 64. Subtract, I get 6. Bring down my 0. How many times does 8 go into 60? Well, 8 goes into 60 7 times. That's 56. Subtract, and I have 4 left over. I don't want a remainder when I'm dividing with a decimal, but I can add another 0 without changing the value of my number. Now I can bring that 0 down. How many times does 8 go into 40? 5. 5 times 8 is 40, with no remainder. So when I divide 15 divided by 8, I get 1 and 875 thousandths. Now you try a couple. What's 114 divided by 4? Don't forget to put your decimal point and 2 zeros.